Our club takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jay Kirsch-Allen, and I'm a director of the Canadian Club of Toronto. My day job is running LinkedIn's North American Workforce Development engagements, and I am super excited to be hosting this panel on networking. People joke that when I joined LinkedIn, that I was jaked in because ever since I was a 12-year-old, I've been running around my parents' heels trying to network. And the group that surrounds me today, virtually, of course, are far, far superior to me in terms of their abilities in networking and also their careers to date. So I look forward to learning from them with you all. The pandemic has affected all facets of our lives, including where, how, and what we do for work. For those looking to change roles or industries, and for new grads, the move to virtual has created different challenges to securing new career opportunities. Today's panel will discuss how to successfully navigate this new landscape, how to stand out to employers, and ways to network virtually. Before we hear from our panelists, here's some information about how to participate with us. The click here to switch stream button helps if you find that your internet is slow. The video quality may decrease, but the audio quality should remain strong. Once you click the questions tab, you can enter your questions in the window and they will be sent to the moderator. The request help button located in the bottom right corner of the page is for technical support. Today, we're also asking questions of you, our audience. You will find the poll tab next to questions and our moderator will let you know when it's time to answer. To participate, click on your chosen response from the list of answers. Thank you to today's event sponsor, SCP Executive Search, a newly founded, woman-led search firm. We are grateful for their support of today's discussion, and I personally love the model. The Canadian Club is a nonprofit. We've been gathering people together for 124 years. It's because of our sponsors that we can continue to do that. Thank you again to SCP. Now to introduce today's panelists. Lauren Gillett is Senior Client Solutions Manager, Government at LinkedIn. Joseph Lowe is a Partner Private Equity Value Creation at PwC Canada. Andrea Mandel-Campbell is a Senior Vice President, Capital Markets for National Public Relations. And David Simmonds is Senior Advisor at the Canadian Centre for the Purpose of the Corporation. Today's discussion will be moderated by Bruce Sellery, CEO of Credit Canada Debt Solutions and past President of the Canadian Club Toronto. One of the club's traditions that has not changed in this virtual world is the toast we make to our country. If you have a drink nearby, please join me in a toast to Canada.
To Canada.
To Canada.
Canada.
Bruce, I'll turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Thank you so much, Jake. I love this topic. and I hate this topic. I love this topic because I am one of those people for whom networking has been the source of some of my greatest achievements, some of my most extraordinary experiences, but it is also a topic that people can get a little squidgy about. So when we talk about networking to get ahead, I want you to think about that at a number of different levels. First off, for you and your career. So you can be a little self-centered about that. How do I get ahead? But at the very same time, I want you to be thinking about how do we get ahead as a country, as a province, as a city, as a community, and as an organization. So we're really going to think quite holistically the idea of networking and where it can apply. We've got a pretty extraordinary crowd of panelists here. They've got different perspectives, different career paths, and different lived experience on this whole question and how to be an effective networker in your career and in your world. Jake mentioned that we are going to do a poll. It'll appear at the bottom of your screen. I want you to go there now and answer this question. I think of networking as a necessary evil. Everybody's told me I have to do this and I hate it. B, I love it. It's an opportunity to make a difference. It's super fun. It's a self-expression. Or networking, I really know what you're talking about. So I want you to just take a second. And while those poll results come in, I am going to begin with you, David. And this is a one-line answer. I don't think you've ever delivered a one-line answer to any question in your entire life. But in this case, let's give it a go. What is one way in which your network made a profound difference in your life that altered the course? Okay, you can have 2 sentences. What's an example of that?
Great to be here, Bruce. It's one line. Just teasing. I think something jumped out at me in your intro around thinking about networking as a way to move communities forward. One way that networking has helped me, I'm an openly queer LGBT executive, and I was able to work for someone who unlocked me in a way that I didn't anticipate because I was connected to that person through my network. And that person unlocked me and helped accelerate my career and build my network. And I'm grateful to that person yesterday, today, and I know I'll be grateful till tomorrow. So I think thinking about communities and the way they come together is super important.
Joe, for you, where has networking made a difference?
I think networking has made a difference in terms of opening doors that I didn't even know existed. So just given education, given how I grew up and early paths, one could have maybe just plotted a course and say, hey, Joe's going to end up here in 20 or 25 years. I think networking has been what's created kind of, frankly, life within that trajectory and more randomness and more interest, to be frank.
Love it. Lauren.
Yeah, when I think of networking in a time that it altered my life, I think back to about 2010, 2011. I was working in the print publishing industry and I lost my job. And I was doing, at the time, I was actually actively working on my digital skills, going to night school, building my digital community on LinkedIn and Twitter. And thank goodness I did, because soon thereafter I lost my job. And I then had to reach out to said network. And I actually requested that people provide me with some recos on LinkedIn, got a ton of them. And that there actually helped me to this day, has helped me to land several jobs after that fact. So wouldn't be here without that network.
That's great. And Andrea, for you, what's one example?
One example would be the poster you see behind me, which is a book I wrote back in 2007, Why Mexicans Don't Drink Molson. I had been a correspondent for the Financial Times in Mexico for a number of years and then came back to Canada and, had been away for a long time, a fish out of water, not particularly connected. But that network that I had built back in Mexico actually, and that many of them Canadians, gave me insights that helped me write this book, provide a point of view that nobody had, and open the door to more people that I would meet in Canada and help me write that book, which was life-changing for me.
Our poll results say 41% a necessary evil, 56% the opportunity to make a difference, and it's a pretty informed crowd. You know what networking is, but I am encouraged at the honesty for those people who did actually declare that for them, networking's a necessary evil. our hope is in our time together, we're going to reduce some of the evilness or some of the stress that is often associated with networking. So we can take that poll down. David, I want to ask you for your personal definition of what networking is. If someone knew nothing about this and said, what do you mean when you say networking? How would you define it?
Someone once told me that leadership is a relationship, and that has stayed with me over the course of time. And I would say that networking is an extension of that relationship. And so when you approach it with an honesty to build relationship, I think you get a pretty significant return.
Joe, for you, what is it for you?
I want to build on kind of the wise words of David's mentor or friend. To me, networking is about contributing, because if you got this relationship, it's about what one gives to it, right? The rest happens and it's great, but it starts with that first step.
And Joe, you recently completed a job search. You were in full on networking mode. I mean, this is kind of who you are. You're forever networking, but you actually had a specific goal in mind to change roles. What did you notice about networking in a pandemic?
So, I'll start with what didn't change. Lots has changed in everyone's lives with the pandemic, but what has not changed is the generosity of people with their time, energy, and kind of good thoughts, right? When you start with kind of those right, I'd say kind of early conceptions of what is networking. What has changed is how we go about doing it. Obviously, we're interacting in this form, not at the Royal York today because of what's going on in the world. And the magic in that is frankly the productivity that has created. So I think there's a balance here. We'll talk about quality, I think, later, but the ability to get what would have been a great networking day in the past, you can probably get done by 10 a.m. these days. So I think it's the balance of how do you maintain quality as velocity just goes up and to the right.
There was also a bit of a cost savings for you, Joe, because I would have forced you to take me for lunch if this was the regular world. And look, you get to talk to anybody you want. You don't even have to buy them coffee.
True that.
There you go. Andrea, a longer term view, what would you say are some of the changes in how we network that we would not have done 20 years ago?
Well, I think one of the things is we're probably pushed a little bit more to reach out to maybe set your sights a little higher in terms of who you might reach out to. Whereas before you might be, 1 degree of separation sometimes, and it might be folks that are just kind of in your general milieu. And I find now it's much easier to, who do I really, really want to talk to? I'm going to reach out to that person. Even if I don't know them, and even if I don't have somebody who's going to introduce me, I'm going to go for it. And we're allowed, I think we're allowed to persist there. That's one piece of advice I would definitely give people, particularly in Canada. Canadians are very quiet, and, you may not hear back right away, but that doesn't mean you don't keep trying. And there's just a greater willingness to develop a trust factor, I would say now, than there was in the past, because you just realize you're not going to have that option anymore.
We're going to use a garden metaphor for networking. So, you think about a useful network, a beautiful network. It is a network that is tended to like a garden. So this is poll number 2. There are essentially, using this metaphor, there are 4 phases of growing and tending a beautiful garden, a beautiful network. First off is planting, getting started. Like, what do I do to actually get the seeds in the ground? Growing it, expanding it over time, harvesting it, knowing when and how to make use of that network, and also reseeding, which is a particular challenge for people who are like in the midpoint of their career. They planted it, but they haven't got a way to, on an ongoing basis, reseed that. So this next poll question is, which is the hardest part? And I know that we have people in all phases of their career, people who might even still be in school or who are really just trying to crack into that industry, people who are mid-career, who are looking for, as Andrea says, like that next thing, that next level, and people who might be at the tail end, who are looking for a different type of networking, for nonprofit board opportunities, for paid board membership. So I just want you to take a second to look at that poll. Ooh, it is active here. I'm going to pin it so I can read it. Planting and getting started is growing. It's about, call it 30%. Planting at 30%, growing at 10, harvesting, knowing how and when to make use of it at 40, and reseeding about 20% or so. Okay, very, very interesting. So the lead phase here is harvesting. I'll be sure to focus my time on that. Lauren, I want to start with you. Where does this all begin? Who do people in the early stages of their career network with? How do they get in touch? And what do they actually say? Because if someone sends me a note and says, hey, I want to network with you, I am less interested than in any of the other statements or requests that they could make. So give us a sense of how people plant.
Yeah, I talk about this a lot with students and people who are new in their career. The first step is just getting the basics right. So, have that LinkedIn profile, fill it out, have a photo. Like when you're reaching out to someone, you're way more likely to get a response if you have a photo. I can't remember the exact stat right now, but, get those basics. And then remember that, you don't necessarily have to have an active voice right away. You can start out by kind of just sitting and being a passive observer and a listener. Follow people in your industry, thought leaders, companies of interest. And then when you do reach out, be very clear about what it is that you're asking for. I actually don't often accept an invitation request from someone if I've never met them or been introduced. But the one exception is if they include a note in their request and they say, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have 5 minutes to talk about X, Y, and Z? I think if you're really specific about what it is that you need, you're way more likely for someone to actually respond to that. And then
what would be some examples of requests you could make? And I ask because I think there's probably a spectrum of ones that are real, like I actually really could use this thing, and other requests which are a thinly veiled attempt for you to just get that person on the phone so they can give you a job.
Yeah, I think if someone's reaching out specifically for a job and saying, I'm looking at this role at LinkedIn, I would love to talk to you as a company insider to find out more about the company and this role. That is really clear to me, and I understand whether that's a good use of my time. If someone just says, hi, I'd like to pick your brain, I'm not quite sure, like about what. Is this a worthwhile use of my time? We're busy, we're all busy, so be very specific.
Andrea, one cannot plant every vegetable and every flower in every part of one's garden. How do you determine which networks you actually want to focus on at the planting stage?
Well, it's interesting. And I've just actually, and it's something that I think you frankly should do at every stage of your career. And I'm in the process of doing the same thing now, because I think for a lot of people with the pandemic, we're all reassessing what matters to us and where we want to spend our time. So I actually went through a process, and I'm sure a lot of people have done this, but I found it very valuable to kind of reassess, what are my values? Where do I want to spend my time? What am I really passionate about? Or what do I care about? What matters to me? And I went through that process. And then once I did that, I kind of put together a bit of a matrix. Okay, so if I want to be on a board, how does that align? And then once you know that, you can then start to reach out to the folks that, people in your own network that may be connected to a board that makes sense to you. Similarly, if there's a sector, for example, that you really care about, let's say it's plant-based foods or renewable energy, and that, then it's about looking within the network you have and kind of moving out from there. But that's where I start. That's where I've kind of been reassessing as I continue to kind of grow. For me, the hardest part of it is not the planting, it's the maintaining. As a journalist, it's very easy for me, or a former journalist, to reach out to people all the time. It's the care and maintenance once you've done it that is where the effort, for me anyway, really resides.
David, knowing you as I do, networking and connecting with people is about as important to you as oxygen. Not everyone shares that value or that gift. For those who have a harder time, what are some of the mechanisms that you could recommend that they try in terms of the planting? Because 100%, there's an organic nature to this, but there's also a very practice like put the seed in the ground in a row.
Yeah, I think the last thing you just said is most important. Put the seed in the ground. be intentional about what you're trying to do. So I think to your point, Bruce, I'm a person that was raised in I had 5 siblings. We were always on teams and church, and people are part of my passion. If that's not what you love, then don't put yourself in that position. Put yourself in a position where you can be deliberate about how to build connection with someone in order to get a result that matters to you. So if you love music, find a spot in your community where you can be in a musical environment and build your network that way. And sport or culture or art, to be intentional, I think, is the key.
Joe, how do you think about the potential buckets in which you could place your networking activities in? Because there's obviously like some really logical ones, like people who used to work at the company that you work for, or people who you went to school with. How do you think more broadly about, other parents at the park who are playing with your kids? Have you got your networking hat eye on those relationships too?
It's interesting because, I guess you get to certain stages in life where those new buckets kind of open up, and at least what I found is you kind of treat them in isolation for a bit, but inevitably, especially if they're real relationships and they're deep, they're going to come into the other parts of your life, and so networking, the network, if you will, becomes kind of a one organic thing again. So I think it's, for me, because it is about relationships, as David mentioned at the outset, all of those different buckets coming together is actually quite natural. And one of the beautiful things, and why great randomness and kind of great unforeseen opportunities can come out of that intermingling. So we start in buckets, or at least I start in buckets, but I actually prefer to bring it together.
Andrea, one of the things that people who are earlier in their careers might not have a sense for is the experience of the person on the other end, on the receiving end. And all of us, to various degrees, have been on the receiving end, have been around for a while. Like, we didn't just graduate yesterday. What can you say it is like to, what? What is it like to be on the receiving end of all these requests? I mean, I just got a new job, and I kid you not, I have received hundreds of LinkedIn requests, just because I have this new job. And so people are sending these requests. It's completely overwhelming. Yeah. What would you say about being on the receiving end that would provide insight for the person who's trying to plant that garden?
Well, I think part of it, as we discussed, is to be a bit more specific and intentional. I'm the type of person, I do get a fair amount of LinkedIn requests. I know there's a general rule around, only accepting from the people you know. I would say if there's something there where there's an alignment, or you can see why that person would want to connect with you, then I accept it. If it's somebody who's trying to connect from an industry completely different from mine, in a different continent, I can tell, who may be searching for a wife. I'm not accepting that one, but, I'm pretty open. And I would say that, I'm at a stage in my career where, there was a time when I was only looking, and you get to a place where you want to give back and you want to help mentor people along. And I love, in particular, young folks who are in their midst of university or just coming out, who are looking for, particularly if they're saying to me, I really love capital markets, I love business, I love communications, I love strategy. How do I get in? I'd like a piece of advice. I can't do it all the time, but what I try to do, just like the habit of networking, and somebody very, very successful, one of Canada's, I would say, most successful business people told me this, which I thought was fascinating. He said, try and meet one new person every week. Make it a habit. A tiny habit that you have. And I would say it goes both ways. So try and make a little bit of time for, one person to give a little bit back. And that's kind of the way. I obviously can't answer everybody, but I do try my best.
Lauren, I want to come to LinkedIn. We're going to move from plant to grow in a second. But before we do that, what are the LinkedIn ninjas doing on planting their network? So the best of the best, what are the top 3 practices that they employ to utilize that platform effectively without starving their garden of the water and the sun and the fertilizer that it needs to actually grow? Because there are some people who could say that they're really good on LinkedIn because they've assembled this massive collection of connections, but it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, I would say number one, curate your experience, like the experience that you want, right? Because your newsfeed is a reflection of who you're following, who you're connected to. Yeah. So all of that makes a big difference in what you're going to see day to day in your feed and how valuable that will be for you. So curate, be active on the platform. So engage people in the conversation. It takes time to develop the confidence to do that. But I think a lot of people starting out, they have that imposter syndrome. Just do it. Perfection is the enemy of done, right? Or the enemy of good. Just start somewhere. If you have something to say, just share it or comment and provide feedback to other people who are, doing something interesting to you. Just get out there. And then finally, I think like with every good garden, you're going to need to prune now and then, right? When you're new in your career, I actually do advise saying yes a lot and, opening lots of doors and seeing what's available. But over time, as you become, you start to prioritize and you understand what is most meaningful to you, you might want to, disconnect from maybe you did accept too many connections right away that are relevant to you. You can disconnect, you can prune and cut your garden as you go. And I think that's really important because we're in an age of digital overload, information overload right now. And there's no way we can manage it all. So
Joe, there are a lot of formal networking structures out there. There's, networking cocktails and industry groups that are very targeted on particular industries, particular levels, particular pieces of the diversity mosaic, all those kinds of things. It can be overwhelming. There's so many things. How do you use them well? How do you pick and choose and use them well?
I think the answer is kind of within the question is you got to pick. So maybe it's like what Lauren mentioned, kind of at the outset of one's career, you're kind of in the consumption mode and just kind of gathering. But eventually, to really kind of drive that intentionality that we've talked about, to really drive that investment of time and energy that will yield the crop that we're looking for, we got to pick our horses. So. I don't know that there's necessarily a rule as to how many, but it's the classic less is more, quality over quantity.
I'm integrating your questions as we go here, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So please keep them coming in. There's one, David, that I want to weave in here for you, and that is putting a fine point on the difference between the coffee and the lunch of 2019 versus the Zoom event. And the question is, what's the best way to hit it off with someone when you're talking to them for the first time, but in a virtual way?
I don't think it's any different than in person. I think you have to do your research. You want to create connection with the person you're trying to build with, whether you're in business or politics or news, right? I think, Andrea, you would have had to do that as a reporter. You want to be able to find commonality and then build that connection. So I always try to Google the person I'm meeting with, find out what they're interested in, and hopefully there's some overlap or connection in our network or a topic that we can sort of bond over at the beginning. So do your research.
We are in a time, and hopefully this time will continue, of a great focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Andrea, you work in a sector that is 95% dudes in capital markets. It is certainly not a world of 50-50. What would you say you have learned about networking when you are not like the others?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that on the one hand, you stand out because this one is not like the others. So that can be good and bad. On the one hand, candidly, there have been times where I've, stuck my hand up in a room and it's not until the guy next to me says, oh, that thing she said, then all of a sudden you get the buy-in. But with that said, what I would say is to be really fearless about it. At the end of the day, don't be afraid to just ask. Just ask, make the ask. I find more often than not, as intimidating as some people may appear, surprisingly, most people are generally generous. So, there's lots of times where, I'm in a room with a lot of folks and there's a question thrown out and there's nobody responding. I might be the only woman there, but I'll be the first one to ask the question because there comes a point where you just have to kind of take the plunge. So what I would say is, yes, sometimes it can be challenging, intimidating, but just be fearless about it and do it.
David, one of the things that you and I share is we have historically been the gay guy in the room, not the only woman in the room, but the gay guy in the room. And there are some people for whom this question of token or tokenism is an opportunity. For some, it's a real burden. What do you say to the people that you're mentoring on that question of being, especially in 2021, a very visible part of a diversity mosaic, that there is at least now a cultural move to move forward, to engage, to think differently?
You know, we spend so much of our lives as LGBTQ2IA people hiding who we are and navigating how to fit in. And I think once you are able to, and everyone has their own journey, once you're able to get a place where you're open about that, you owe it to yourself to run into that fire. You owe it to yourself to discover the power that being different actually gives you through resilience. And what I found is that in and of itself creates connection with people. So I talk openly about one of my most powerful mentors being Jamie Watt. And Jamie and I have a lot that is not the same, right? Jamie's a white guy from Oakville. I'm a black kid from Scarborough and Brampton. Jamie is a conservative. I'm not. But what we have in common is that we've grown up in spaces where we were different. And he unlocked me by saying, run into that difference, because it doesn't affect how smart you are, how talented you are, or how ambitious you are. So lean in. And that opened up a world for me where I was on the board of the Canadian Club where he was. I'm now on the board of Stratford where he was. And it's not because of him, but it's in credit to the investment he's made in me. So I think find that person in your network. And oftentimes it happens faster when you're able to connect through difference.
Joe, we definitely have people on this event, attending this event, and certainly in the world, who are part of groups that are fully represented. They are white, they are straight, and I think they have a question, articulated or not, is what about us? There is so much focus on BIPOC and LGBTQIA and all that stuff. What do you say to someone who is in a more traditional upbringing and color?
Well, we're talking about networking, right? So, kind of within that network is that majority group that you just referenced is a powerful constituency. Kind of within that group, we're obviously expanding. We're in a world of an expanding pie, not a shrinking one, in my view. So it's really just a matter of if with a great kind of power influence also comes great responsibility. So how do we all give back to that, frankly, irrespective of group? And if we're frankly in a more empowered one, there's greater responsibility to do so. That's my personal view.
The EDI mosaic is so broad and so nuanced. One of the parts of diversity is temperament. And there are people like me, people like David, who are extroverts. We are connectors. We like eat this stuff for breakfast. And there are other people who really are not temperament-wise. They are less comfortable. Lauren, I want to ask you, what advice do you have for people for whom this doesn't come naturally, who probably answered yes to the question, networking, I think, is a necessary evil?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to this because I'm an extrovert. My husband is very introverted. He's a programmer, likes to be behind the scenes. I would say, be aware of your energy, what drains your energy, what gives you energy. If you find networking very draining, maybe set some just manageable goals for yourself. Okay, I'm going to reach out to, one person a week. I'm going to attend one event a month or quarter, whatever works for you. I think setting intentional goals and trying to stick to them might be a good way to manage that. And maybe seek out opportunities for one-to-one contact or more intimate group networking environments versus like a massive event where, you might be a little bit hesitant to speak up and raise your hand.
Yeah. Bruce, can I just add to that a little bit? I mean, I am an extrovert, but at the same time, I'm not particularly a joiner. I was, as a journalist, you're a former journalist anyway, you're a bit of a lone wolf that way. And so always was a bit critical of any kind of organized anything. And I found that it's something that you have to look at it almost like a skill or an attribute that you learn, just like anything else. If you want to learn to be an active listener. You want to learn to be more resilient. You want to learn to be more empathetic. You want to learn how to be a leader. I think networking is a skill and an attribute that you can learn to do better. But as it's been said, it's something like, as I mentioned before, it's almost like a tiny habit that you can integrate into your daily routine or your weekly routine.
Plant, grow, now harvest. We've got another poll here, and that is to look at which you see as being the network that provides the most bounty for you. So there are a number to choose from. Alumni network, that may have been, where you went to school, a work network of former employers, extracurricular networks, like you played intramural ultimate frisbee, and that was the relationship that got you what you wanted. Formal industry networks can be really important for some people. And then informal ones, that's kind of the grab bag of people who you met at a backyard barbecue at one point. So just take a second to look at those polls. And I want to turn to Joe with this next question, and that is, how do you know if it's time to harvest? Because we've done the planting, we've done the growing, and there are some relationships in which we can make a more significant ask, and some in which we can't yet, because it's going to be experienced by the other person as that we are a taker. What's the advice you would have on that question?
Gee, that's tough. It's one of those answers you just kind of know. And there's a need that defines it as well, right? So there may very well be a need that's out there that doesn't respect really kind of the seasons, if you will.
Right.
But I think it's about being a bit introspective and analytical about that. So you've got your network, you've got a need. Hopefully, you've been contributing to it over time and not just taking. And so that when there is a need there, you can go out and harvest judiciously, but also with confidence. So you want to have done your homework in advance, so I think would be the key message there.
What's the expression, David? It's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. Do you lean in, David, on these requests? I can't imagine you're super shy.
I'm very shy. You're giving away, Bruce, you're giving away all my secrets today.
All right.
As Joe was talking, I think my grandparents are heroes of mine, and my grandmother particularly. She's a Methodist, and there's a saying about doing all the good you can to all the people you can and all the ways that you can. And a part of that too is that you do well by doing good. And without applying any evangelical or ecclesiastical application to this, I think you do well by doing good. And if you're part of a network where you're earnest and your actual intention is positive, what I found is the opportunities to harvest come, like the season kind of shows up and you're ready to do the work. So, I transitioned away from a company this year, and I'm transitioning into new opportunities. And the opportunities were presented because the people around me knew David's in a transition, and David's, for whatever reason, they thought I was a good person and I have something to offer. And so the conversations happen. So it's easier to ask and to give. And what I'd say is, Frances Lincoln said this to me once after some work that we did together. She said, when you're in that room now, you have an obligation to keep the door open. And so I think to anybody, no matter what that room looks like, keep it open because you're probably going to need someone to open it for you eventually as well.
That's great. Lauren, how do you make it as easy as possible for your network to help you? Because sometimes she's like, I want to be helpful, but the ask is convoluted or complicated. And other times it's like, Bruce, so-and-so, here's the email. Could you add a sentence off the top and forward it to them? And I'm like, good. It's good. It's going to take me about 20 seconds. Of course I will do that. What's some guiding tips on how you can make it really easy to harvest?
Yeah, I think that to that point is definitely one. Like if you can pre-write a letter of recommendation or an email that you want to send for an introduction and hand that to someone on a plate. I mean, there you go. You've just saved them a bunch of time. I think when I think back to that time when I lost my job and I reached out to my network for recommendations, people really genuinely want to help, but they don't often know why or how to do that. And so I said, if you can just provide a quick recommendation on my LinkedIn, it'll take you, this many minutes, and give them something maybe to write. They all did it. I think I have like 20 recommendations just from that one outreach asking for help when I lost my job. People do want to help. Other than that, I think, offering to have a quick call does help if people have the time, getting on a call to clarify. But really just anything you can do to save people time.
I want to bring in, Patrick, the poll results, because I got to tell you, this surprised me. And to the panelists, and maybe I'll come to you, Joe, and for your feedback. First off, 10% said their alumni network is most important. 38% said work alumni, formal industry 19, extracurricular, the ultimate Frisbee people only 10, and then this informal network 23%. Does anything about that surprise you? I'm surprised that alumni networks and formal networks are not higher.
It just moved slightly just in reaction to your comment, Bruce. Yeah, so I think my first reaction is, on one hand, it doesn't surprise me because work alumni are probably most proximate to your next opportunity. So it's just functional. I think what it's telling me a little bit, though, is maybe there's a time horizon question here, because I'd argue that some of these other networks are longer plays and are more inclusive of one's kind of broader life. And so it's just about time horizon and goal, I think. So if I don't remember how you posed the question specifically, but if it's about getting a job, the next job next week, maybe this makes sense. If it's a little bit broader than that and it's more career oriented or more kind of around the arc of, frankly, life, then I think we should encourage these other networks more.
Andrea, further to that question about the objective of the outreach to your network, what do you go to your network for when you're not in job search mode? How do you harvest that in ways when it's not about a business development thing or a job search thing? What do you go and ask who give you an egg?
No, sometimes it's really just about now. It's around if I come across something that I think would be, I'd say it's more of a giving thing, frankly. How can I help this person? I've had an interesting meeting with someone, and actually that is a good connection for someone else. So I will often try and connect dots. I spend, I think, a lot of time trying to connect dots that are beneficial for two different parties, let's say, and I can help do that. So I would say that's kind of a way that I use it now. And I think the other way to think about, think about how we're thinking about networking, somebody said this to me the other day, which I thought was really interesting, is to think about when you're thinking about your network and think about who is a mentor, who would you use as a mentor, and who would you use as a sponsor? And they're different people. So somebody, if you think you want to reach out to someone, but you're not sure how, you use your mentor to ask the question, how would you approach this person? The sponsor is somebody who's going to do the introducing for you when there's someone you actually want to talk to. So I would just say that there's a few different ways to slice and dice how you think about people.
Bruce, if I can.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Sorry, just Andrea's distinction between mentor and sponsor is extremely important. And I don't think I realized it until I was mid-cycle in sort of my growth trajectory. A sponsor, to Andrea's point, is going to speak up for you and invest in a way that a mentor probably shouldn't, right? So when you think about your network, I would say, and I do brand and comms as a profession, you want to run into your differentiated capability. So whatever network is where you stand out the most, it's probably the network where you're going to have a sponsor, right? So I think about Western, which is one of Canada's preeminent universities. Joe and I share that network. So everyone should just go on and register to alumniwestern.ca. That space for me has been a differentiated community. Like I have had experiences where people around that institution can say, David's special for this reason. So I lean on sponsors in that community. So find your Western or come to us and then have sponsors who can speak out and speak up for you.
Plant, grow, harvest, reseed, as in seed it again and again. I want to ask you, Lauren, what's your process? Do you have like a part of LinkedIn that has a CRM that will prompt you to do things? I'm pretty old school. I have an Excel spreadsheet and it sorts my network through different buckets and communities. And probably once a quarter, I go through that and look and see, I haven't talked to that person in a while, and I'll have it on my radar to call them because I'm, old school. And often I'll leave a chatty voicemail. Maybe I'll sing in my terrible way, but I will have a process, a practice. What are some things that you do to reseed? You don't have to sing, though I bet you can sing better than I can.
Well, we do actually have a product called Sales Navigator that people can use when they're prospecting leads at companies. And I actually do use that product myself just to keep on top of what's happening in my clients' industries with friends and other colleagues. But my actual process is a little bit more organic than that. We do quarterly quarterly, goals and objectives at work. And we have like a career plan that we work on with our managers. And so I'm very intentional about, what I'm going to get involved with every quarter, every half year, every year. I lead a Families at LinkedIn Employee Resource Group. So that's a team where I invest a lot of my time. And so I know that I'm going to really work on that network and make sure it's healthy. I think picking things that matter most to you and making a plan for how you're going to engage with that, staying involved. So it's not, you can't just, attend one event and then kind of that's it and leave it. I think if something's important to you, you have to, continue to show up, participate, listen, learn. It's an ongoing thing for me. So, but I am intentional about what I'm going to take on every quarter, whether it's mentoring other people or being mentored. I set goals.
Joe, I want to ask you about reseeding within organizations, because a lot of this is outward looking, right? You're kind of aware of, where you want to build clients or build your next career opportunity. People still do stay in organizations for a long period of time, A, and B, stuff gets done because the person in legal or product development or security or whatever it is. Those relationships matter in the moment, even if you stay at the organization for 20 years. What are companies doing? What should individuals be doing in order to enable those relationships internally?
So I think the leading companies, and I'm glad you asked that question, Bruce, because I feel like I've got lived experience in both in a way. I was in a large corporation for many years where understanding and working in that network was the recipe of my success. And I didn't really, frankly, need to go outside. Flipping into mid-market private equity companies, the world is my oyster, and I'm going to go out and go find oysters. And then now in a large professional services firm, I kind of have to do both. I have clients on the outside, but I've got this vast machinery on the inside that I really need to understand and leverage and contribute to in order to help it help me, if you will. So I think, back to your question, I think great organizations have set up interest groups so that people can gravitate to the micro networks that resonate with them within the larger network in order to build a reputation beyond just, hey, so-and-so is great at their job, but they contribute to the firm, they contribute to the company in differential ways as well. And then leveraging that back into, hey, here's a core job, and then here's how we make a difference in the company or the network more broadly. So I think it's the best organizations going to bring all of those pieces together. And if they don't, obviously it's our responsibility to create those opportunities.
Andrea, you seeded at the beginning that reseeding was your area of opportunity, the thing that you continue to work on. What are some things that you've learned knowing that this is the hardest part of the four for you?
The hardest part of reseeding is to actually, and I've spent some time doing this, is really going through I think David talked about this, like all of your life cycles in terms of from the beginning. I haven't always been good at that because I was the type of person who's like on to the next interesting thing, and traveling and living in different places is to reconnect with those individuals. And it's really interesting because I think, and I hate to use this term now more than ever, it's totally overused, but I'm finding that that is something that has been really gratifying, is to go back through time and being able to reconnect, purposefully reconnecting. Part of what I'm doing in that way, I'll say, just very personally, is trying to be a bit more authentic when I am online. I'm not a Facebook user and I don't share that way, but I do use LinkedIn, it's not a pitch. I am there. And whereas before it would be very professional only, I feel like it's an opportunity to share a little bit more about who I am and what matters to me. So I, intermittently will share with that community, who are my networking community as well, that goes back through many iterations of myself and my career. And I found that to be a great way to re-engage and reconnect with people.
Okay, I'll make a comment on that, Bruce, if I could. Andrea, I feel like I've actually gotten to know you a little bit better through LinkedIn, through that, exactly what you just described. So it does work. And I think it's to my point earlier, kind of these networks that we talk about, we can bucket them, but really it's about ourselves kind of in the middle of them. So how do we bring our authentic selves? That maybe it's proportionality around kind of professional versus personal, whatever. But I think it's important to recognize that we do need to bring our whole self as long as it's appropriate.
Another question from the floor here, Lauren, this goes to you. And that is, what should job seekers stop doing? So there's, a lot of practices out there. Are there any that you would flag like, you don't want to do that anymore?
Yeah, I think the number one mistake I see on LinkedIn is people treating it as, a traditional resume where it's just like, a dump, almost like they took the resume and pasted it online with bullet points. And, think of it, or writing in the third person, write in the first person, tell a story about yourself, try to keep it concise, but yeah, don't treat it just as a digital resume. Put a little bit more thought into it. And then I think that is really the number one. People do wrong.
David, this one's for you. Networking is particularly hard for newcomers, says the question asker here, and especially those who experience a language barrier. What's advice you have for those job seekers? Because, man, it's people who've lived in Canada their whole life have networks that are just connected to the fact that they've been here for decades. Newcomers don't have that, and they may not speak English perfectly.
Yeah. I don't have that particular lived experience, so I don't want to project advice, but what I've experienced, and I think it may be helpful, is to run into the opportunities to get the support you need to do that networking. So, I was involved with what Civic Action is the name of it now. When I was involved with it, it was called the City Summit Alliance. There were programs and initiatives that were deliberately out there to help newcomers connect and build their networks. And sometimes we don't want to put our hands up and we don't want to be identified in that way. I would say in this space, you should, because there's so much return that happens when you're able to do that. And I think the same is true. Bruce, you mentioned LGBT people. The same was true for me with Out on Bay Street, or, the same was true for me, joining the Black Students Alliance at Western. So I think you want to be able to put your hand up, be counted, and then count on the network to help you, because people do want to help.
We're going to wrap up and just, Andrea, go ahead.
Very quickly, where I found it, because that's something that is extremely challenging. And I remember when I wrote my book and actually reaching out to new Canadian communities, and they're like, you want to talk to us? Nobody ever asks us. But what I found, like when I went into politics, that was a great way for new Canadians, for example, to begin to make those connections. What I learned and was surprised to learn as a fourth generation Canadian, that a lot of the networks, let's say in Toronto, are politically connected. It's like, which party did you campaign with? Which party are you volunteering with? And a lot of the folks that ended up volunteering when I ran were new Canadians. And it was a great way for them to connect with their local communities and make connections into the organizations and communities that later help them. So I would say politics is one interesting way for people to get involved.
We are going to wrap things up.
We have a feature on our profile where you can record the pronunciation of your name. That is actually a really cool feature that people should use. It's right on your profile. I had
no idea. That's genius. Celery like the vegetable. Just like the vegetable. We're going to wrap it up in just a second. And panelists, I'm going to ask you for your last word. So I'm going to ask you for your last word in just a minute or so. But before we do that, Lauren, I want to ask you, because this question just came across and it's so tactical and so relevant. And that is, can you speak to the frequency of contact that would be effective? You can hear the exhaustion in this statement. It says, sometimes it feels like I'm becoming a coach or a counselor, and it's time consuming because there's one person in my network who's constantly asking me for coffee chats and job searches. What's the best? The best is the wrong word. What is some perspective on frequency?
That's really tough. I have the same challenge. And to be honest, I think it's really just about setting boundaries, the necessity of saying no sometimes. Let them know what you're willing to do. If it's once a month, then stick to that. If it's once a quarter, then let them know. And if that's not enough for them, maybe you can recommend someone else that can also contribute to the coaching and mentoring, because we only have so many hours in the day. Many of us have families and other responsibilities. So just set boundaries, set clear boundaries. Yeah.
We have talked about so many things, Joe. I'm going to come to you. We've talked about the plant, the grow, the harvest, the reseed. Is there one thing that you would say either that hasn't yet been said, or that you would want to put a real punctuation on and leave people with a call to action? What is your last word? I'm going to start with Joe. Lauren, I'm going to go to you second.
I'd say I hate finishing with a negative statement, but I think here it's actually apropos. Networking, you can't start with harvest. You got to go back to the beginning of the cycle that Bruce showed us. That's networking.
Yeah, plant. Lauren, for you, a last word.
My last word would be don't wait. Don't wait for opportunity to come to you or to get permission. If there's something out there that you want, if there's an event or a network that it doesn't exist that you'd like to see exist, create it. Partner with someone. Make it happen. Don't wait.
It's great. Andrea.
Don't give up. What I would say is that oftentimes Canadians are so polite. They reach out one time, they don't hear anything, and they're like, I guess that's a no. It's not a no. Just try again. Don't harass people, but you know what? Try again. Try a few more times and then move on. But don't interpret silence, particularly in Canada, as necessarily a no.
Right. Your journalist experience is definitely playing out there. You would not have thrived in that industry had you probably ever taken no for an answer. David, let me round things out with you. What is one final point that you would make on this topic of networking?
The words of my colleagues are so powerful, so I won't try to. That's good career advice. I'll just give you personal advice. In the words of Mama Roo, if you can't love yourself, how in the heck are you going to love anybody else? So give yourself license to celebrate you and all the greatness that you are, and you'll find other people are going to want to celebrate you as well.
Amazing stuff. Well, this was really, really an extraordinary conversation. Jake's going to come back and I'll pass the baton to him. But let me first say my thanks to Lauren, to David, to Andrea and Joe for embracing this metaphor and providing such practical and conceptual help on how we can plant and grow and harvest and reseed a network that makes a difference for us as individuals, but also that makes a difference for our city, our province, our country, and the world. So thank you to our panelists. And Jake, the floor is now yours again.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Really appreciate it. Guests, first and foremost, thank you for spending your lunch hour online with us today. Bruce, as always, thank you for bringing your expertise to the podium. And thank you for opening up with us. An introduction that led to a conversation, which I think, as you put it, captured way beyond what an individual can contribute to via networking to what the community as a whole can, and even the garden. Lauren, Joe, Andrea, David, we appreciated your wisdom, your insights on building networking, on building your networks, on making meaningful connections in this new virtual world. Thank you also for your openness about your personal and your work experiences. I appreciated your insights on how networking authentically helped your lives at home and at work, and even the appropriate ways to bring these together. Everyone echoed that networking was about giving as much as it was about growing or connecting. And everyone talked about how methodical, thoughtful, tactful, and meaningful they were about it, and that that's what leads to success. Thank you again to SCP Executive Search for sponsoring today's event. Our events would not be possible without our sponsors. So again, thank you, SCP, for sponsoring, and thank you again for your continued generosity. Thanks to our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca for making it possible for us to come together virtually today. Guests, thank you for joining us. Good luck with your networking, and please stay healthy and safe.